How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Bill, and in today's video... How's it going, guys? Welcome to the channel. My name is Bill, and in today's video, we're going to go installing some parts that I have kind of mixed emotions about. The reason being, and what we're going to be installing is the bronc bushing and the bronc braces from Broncbusters. Now, if you're not familiar, steering has some issues. You've probably seen that people have complained about the tie rod ends for the Bronco, and here's an example of one. It's not very thick, it's not very strong, and they can break easily. They can and have broken on people, like right at the joint. What they've done over at Broncbusters is they kept breaking them. He's a heavy off-roader. He's like hitting 8 and 9 trails out in Moab and out in the desert and everything. And he was breaking those, so he was trying to find a solution to them. And, you know, this is the part I love. I love the fact that, you know, entrepreneurial spirit. He's gone out there, he kept breaking them, he found a solution, and now he's selling his solution, which is the bronc braces. Unfortunately, I don't have the braces here with me right now because they are off getting powder coated, but let me see if I have the paper. Yeah, but basically it's just 2 pieces of aluminum that squeeze over that joint where it breaks easily, and it strengthens it, and it prevents those tie rod ends from breaking. Now, the part that I'm iffy about, that I don't like about this, is the fact that, you know, I've got this now because I don't want my tie rod ends to break. Other people are going to go out there, they're going to get these. People that don't necessarily need them are going to go out there and get them just because, for the extra security. That's the same reason I want them. Like, you know, I've been not so nice with my Bronco. There's been a couple of times where I'm like, I'm sure these are going to snap, and luckily they haven't. But there's also going to be people that are getting these that don't necessarily need them. And for those that do not get these and are just mildly wheeling, because I've seen people break these tie rod ends and they're not even doing anything super hardcore off-road. You know, they're not doing anything that would warrant really needing to have to beef these up. They should just, OEM should just work. You shouldn't have to worry about them breaking. And now, since everybody's going to be beefing theirs up, there's going to be less and less people breaking them, which seems like a good thing. But the thing that I don't like about that is Ford's going to use that as evidence for people that do break them. We're like, oh, well, you must have been abusing it because we have all these Broncos out here. There's people that are doing all kinds of stuff and they haven't broken them. So we cheaped out on the part. We went with the part that we thought would be strong enough. Not overly strong, not, strong for any situation, but strong enough. And so far, you're only X percent of people that have come back and say they've had a problem with this, and they're going to be able to deny warranty claims because they're like, oh, you must have been abusing it. Here's all this evidence that that you're such a small fraction of people that are breaking them, you must have done something wrong. Where that's not necessarily the case. The reason people aren't breaking them is because they are beefing them up. They are buying aftermarket parts and doing that. So it's kind of giving Ford, an out. To where they say, oh, well, our bean counters are right. We didn't have to put those thicker tie rods on there. We saved X amount of dollars by putting these thinner ones on there, and it's working. No, we're not getting complaints, or we're getting just a small fraction of complaints. So, it's definitely not worth putting something stronger on there. So for that reason, I'm a little bit iffy about it because, Like if everybody just was braking them and going to Ford like, hey, these keep breaking, then Ford would have to come out and say, yes, okay, we need to put stronger ones in there. Maybe do a recall, or if not do a recall, at least in future models, put stronger ones in here. Being that this is the first year model, you know, and people are breaking them, that should provide, everybody should be reporting that to Ford and saying, hey, these are breaking, just so they have the data. Even if you do end up replacing them yourself or beefing them up or anything, anytime something breaks, report it to Ford. Anyway, gone off on a tangent here a bit. But the second issue with that is whenever you strengthen a breaking point, because one argument that I've seen a lot of people make is like, well, they're supposed to break. It's like a fuse. It's a part that it's going to break and prevent other things further up from breaking. Okay, I see that argument a bit, but they break. It's like putting too little of a fuse in there. It's like having a 50 amp circuit and putting a 5 amp fuse in there. Sure, it's going to pop, but it's going to pop way too soon and way before it needs to. But if you beef up these joints so they can now handle 100 watts, now you put a 100 watt fuse in there, now the next thing up the line is going to get too much power and it's going to be able to break. And that next thing that's breaking is actually the steering rack itself. Now Tyler from Broncbusters put out a great video about what is breaking. And the thing to note is if you're not beefing up your tie rod ends, your tie rods are going to be what breaks. You don't need to go and get this steering adjustment, the steering rack fix, if you're not beefing up your tie rods, because those most likely are going to break way before this does. But what's happening is, due to an angle, it's breaking this piece here. It's actually breaking the casting, and this is what keeps your steering rack up against the gears, and that's popping loose. So what they've built is this bronc bushing, which it's just a piece of engineered plastic that goes in here, keeps this from being able to move and keeps that from breaking. So they went out, they're like, hey, we're breaking tie rod ends. They fixed that problem. But I love the fact that they didn't say, oh, well, we'll stop there. Everybody's going to have stronger tie rod ends. They went out there, they tested it. They're like, all right, great. We're not breaking tie rod ends anymore, but we are breaking the steering rack. Like I said, they moved the failure point back further. Now, luckily in this system, that's pretty much it. I mean, other than that, the next thing you're going to be doing is stripping out these gears and maybe need stronger gears. But if they're not doing that yet, and they're off-roading a lot more hardcore than I do, I feel comfortable in just doing these and that I'll be fine. Like I said, this is for my own sense of security. I don't want to be stuck out on the trail with no steering, with broken tie rod ends and everything like that. I'm gonna go ahead and show you, we'll tear into the actual installation. If you've seen my previous videos where I had to replace the front differential, I also went ahead and replaced the steering rack. I thought maybe we messed that up. I think it skipped a tooth, but it did not actually break out this piece, which is what I was concerned it did. So we can reuse this. Now when I swapped everything out, I didn't get any errors right away, but since then, now every time I start the Bronco, I get a warning saying that, I get an error saying there's an issue with this, the lane assist, and to get it serviced. Pulled the codes and everything and looked, the code is, I'll put it on the screen, I don't remember what it is right offhand, but it's a fault with the power steering module. Lo and behold, hey, I just changed the power steering module. It's part of the steering rack. So I don't know if I could just take this off and swap it and then that would be good. But I'm just going to keep everything together as is. I tried looking for how to clear the code. I looked through Forescan to see if there is a way. And apparently either through Ford IDS or FRDS, whichever one the Bronco's using, there's a procedure that you need to go through where you have to have the original one in there, go through the procedure, tell the software, okay, I'm about to change this out. The software will say, okay, go ahead, change it out. Put the new one in and then complete the process, which I'm not a Ford tech. I don't have Ford IDS. I don't have the software. I don't have the connector or anything. I actually looked into getting it because I was considering. It's like, well, I kind of wouldn't mind having that because I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to disconnect or get rid of the bass leveling or the rear speakers, which you have to do through that software as well. So maybe I will, but it's a little ridiculously priced. It's a little bit out of my scope for what I want to get right now. So instead, I think I'm just going to go ahead, put this back in. But before we put it back in, I'm going to go ahead, beef it up with the Broncbuster bronc bushing. This little clamp, it's not going to be easy to get to and disconnect while this is installed. It's just one of these, you could just get a screwdriver in and pop it open and you should be able to take it off. Then you got another clamp here at the bottom and you can just slide that off. Then the whole boot slides off. But what you got to take this bolt off for, or this boot off, is for this nut right here. And that's a big boy. I think it's 35 millimeters. So you could take that off and that'll allow you to take the entire tie rod, the inner tie rod piece off. So you take the whole tie rod off. Let me see if I can find a wrench for that. And no surprise, I didn't have a 35 millimeter wrench, but I do have this bad boy. I have 35 millimeter sockets, but that doesn't do me much good here. I have to run a bolt down into this table just so I could get that off of there. Jeez, there it goes. Alright, so this is your tie rod. This is the inner, the outer, and that's how it attaches. Now, there is a retainer that's in there. I don't know how well you can see it, but we're going to have to remove that. It's this little black piece here. Alright, so here's the piece. The Broncbuster figured out that, hey, if we take this piece of plastic that is easy to crush, easy to destroy, and it's more of a manufacturing piece for a guide pin. It doesn't provide any support, it just provides guidance while manufacturing, put everything together so everything lines up. We take that out and replace it with this. It's got a larger bump here that fits into that cavity, so there's no room for it to go. It stays there. This center is going to be the same as this. It's actually a little bit tighter of a tolerance, so there's less wiggle room for this shaft. And it's going to support the shaft, and it's not going to allow that shaft to go up there to break this. So you gotta make sure, his instructions say make sure that you have the steering turned all the way to the passenger side, which is what this would do. It would push the passenger side front out and pull the driver's side in, and you want to make sure that you have about that it's recessed, because you want to be able to fit the install tool in there. And so where we saw that bevel, we want to make sure that that is going into the bevel. So you put this on there, I'm going to give this a good whack. And it's going to reset that, but it's only going to go as far back as this hole. So you want to make sure that where this stops actually recessed from the end. There's a small line right inside, and that's where these little hooks were kind of digging into in there. So they gave Broncbusters supplied a snap ring. You don't even need snap ring pliers for that. Just had to set it in there. You could use the same install tool and just kind of press it in. Give it a little tap. And yep. And just snap right into that ring. That's going to prevent that from coming out. Now that piece is in there tight anyway. I don't think it's coming out, but that's going to make sure it doesn't. That's pretty tight in there. So I imagine that'll loosen up a bit after some movement back and forth, after everything gets fully lubed in there and everything. But that does tighten up the steering a bit, so it's going to be a little bit harder to steer when I first put this back in. Now while I got this out, like I said, I'm going to go ahead, take the other side off, because I'm not putting these tie rods back on. I'm going to go ahead and use the tie rods that are on the other one. So I'm going to take these off, store these, they'll be my spares in case I ever need them, and then I'll keep the ones that are on there already on there, because I know those are good. So let's I'm going to go ahead and take this one off. Hey, it's going to be the same as taking that one off, so nothing I need to do. And then I'll bring the Bronco in here and we'll climb under it and see how hard it is to take this rack out when the diff is still in there, because I'm definitely not taking that back out again. So to do this on the vehicle, I'm not 100% sure if we need to remove the front tires. I'm sure it'd be much easier if you did. However, I'm going to try to do it without, just so we could see if you actually do need to take the wheels off or not. Because you can get to everything. If you turn the wheels out, you can get to the tie rod end. You should be able to get that bolt off. It seems like we should have enough room in here to be able to get to everything without having to actually take the wheel off. It's not that it's not that it's hard to take the wheels off, but I'm not gonna lie, these things are heavy and I just don't feel like messing with them today. So I'm gonna try to work around taking these off. As you see, it did get the rings back from powder coating. I think they turned out great. That's besides the point. So first, I got everything turned over to this side as far driver as I can. Take this nut off and see if we can't loosen these clamps with everything in place. If you were doing this modification, take this driver side tie rod off, put the bushing in, put this tie rod back on, and you would be done. Now if you give the knuckle a couple of taps, normally I'll break this free. So now the trick, and I don't know how well you can see that. But as I was saying, when I was up on the bench where it's hard to get that clamp off of, because it's going to be right up in here, so you're going to need to get a good length screwdriver to pop that clamp off of there to get this boot off. So I showed you how to do that off on the bench so you can get a better idea of exactly how that clamp needs to come off. And then, because I know I can barely show you with the clamp now with the light and the light in the camera as is, much less me trying to take the clamp off of there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get a long screwdriver, try to get it in there and pry that clamp off, and then we can go from there. Alright, so managed to pop the clamp off of there. So then on this bottom clamp, just need to squeeze that, pull that down. Now this whole boot should slide off and down. And this is the bolt we need to loosen. So I'm gonna get my big old crescent wrench so I can get in there and loosen that. Break that loose. This whole thing will. Now, like I said, if all you were doing was installing the bronc bushing, all you would need to do now is turn your steering wheel to push this over far enough to where you could get the little retainer that was in there out and push your new piece in, then put everything back together. However, that's not all we're doing, so I'm going to go basically everything I just did on this side to take the tie rod end off. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then we're going to take the steering rack down. It's pretty simple installation. There's one bolt, 10mm, that clamps the steering linkage here so you can steer it, and then just 2 bolts that go straight through. I'll put a link up to that video up in the corner, and then if you want to check out more details on that. Okay, so it took a bit of fighting, but finally got it out. And I thought for sure this was going to have to come out, the differential, because it didn't seem like there was any way whatsoever to get that out. But had to take, instead of taking the differential out, I was able to remove this mount. So the mount goes like that. There's 2 bolts underneath, and then one that goes through the front and into it, which is the bottom mount for the differential. So I had to pull that out. Once I got that out, I was able to finally wiggle this thing out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead, put the other one back in, and we can button everything back up. If you're not like me and you don't have to change out a whole bunch of stuff, and you're just trying to install this Broncbuster bushing, then here's where you'd be picking back up. You have the bushing in there. You go ahead, turn your wheel towards the driver's side, so we have room over here now. I'll go ahead, take our tie rod end, line it up, and try not to cross thread it. There we go. But once we get started, we're going to tighten that. We got to get our big old wrench and throw one there. Now before connect this, I'm going to make sure I put my clamp on there the way I want. That's going to go up there. And slide our boot all the way back. Slide that into position. Tighten up that clamp for the boot. Make sure it's on there all the way. Alright, so that's getting the bronc bushing installed. I've made a whole lot more steps than necessary because I was swapping the gearbox back out. But normally, if you were doing that, all you'd have to do is take this one tie rod off, pull the little plastic piece out, put the bushing in, and then put this back on. So much easier than what I just made it look like. Now that we got everything back together, we can put these braces on. The inside is bored out, so you get a thicker side that's going to fit over here. The nut's going to fit in there, and then the smaller side's going to fit in here. So you can see the back side's going to fit on just like so. Push that boot up just a hair and see that's how it's going to fit on there. And so that's going to clamp that together, so strengthening this weak spot right here. Fit that on there. Squeezed on there pretty good already. Just go through, tighten all those bolts down on the back end, and just gotta get through, tighten all those screws up on the back end, and then that'll be good. And then we'll go over to the other side, do the other side. All right, so there we are, installed. So that's gonna strengthen that joint right there. So yeah, I know Tyler has broken a lot of these, and this is what he's put together and what's worked for him, and I think that's awesome. So kudos to him for finding an issue, finding a solution to his issue. You know, I have no problem with the entrepreneurial side of that. Good for him. The thing that, like I said, that bugs me is the fact that we have to do this, or I feel compelled to have to do this because most people don't have extra tie rod ends. You know, a lot of people are like, well, if you're going to go off-roading, take tie rod ends with you. You can't order tie rod ends right now. You know, regardless of your setup, there's a chance that they'll break, but these break way easier than they should. If you're going to be off-roading at all, if you're any kind of off-roading, I would recommend to do this, or one of the other new companies that are coming out with beefed up tie rod ends. I would recommend that. As far as the bushing for the steering, I don't know necessarily if I would recommend that for everybody. If you're definitely if you're going to be doing like a big lift, if you're going to be doing a big lift and off-roading, and you're going to beef up these, and then you're going to be doing more on the extreme side of off-roading, I would say, then yes, then I would recommend that. If you're just keeping stock height, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're doing stock height to like a 1 or 2 inch lift, I probably wouldn't worry about the thing. If you go over a 2-inch lift, then I would worry about the steering, because you're putting more of an angle on there to be able to brake it easier. But if you're doing that and you're not putting something stronger on here, these are going to break before your steering rack does, so you probably don't need that. But if you're doing a larger lift, you're going to be doing heavier off-roading, then yes, I would definitely recommend these, or some way to beefing up these tie rod ends and doing the steering rack upgrade. So now I have no fears. I feel a lot more comfortable with the steering components. The driveline, not so much, just because of how badly tore up that front diff was. But like I said, that's something I'll end up beefing up as well. But I gotta worry about, you know, what's going to break next if I do beef up the driveline, because I got the transfer case and transmission are next in line, which I really don't want to break either one of those. But yeah, these are simple, pretty simple. There's a little bit involved for putting that bushing in. This video made it a lot longer than it needed to be, but that was because I was swapping out the rack. But you know, you take the tie rod off, put the bushing in, put the tie rod back on, then you can put these braces on there, and they're good to go. These they're aluminum. You know, it's just like a silver aluminum block. I was getting powder coating done for those rings anyway, and I was like, hey, can we throw those in there as well and get them done at the same time, just to kind of tie that in. That is the Broncbuster bronc brace installed on the tie rod. I still got to do the other one. It's simple. Just I'm going to turn the steering wheel to the other side and put that one on. And the bronc, too many bronc things. Bronc, what the hell is his name again? I just said it, now I've already forgotten it because I said bronc too many times. And the Broncbuster bronc bushing for the steering rack. So those are installed. I feel confident that our steering components are going to be beefed up strong enough. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I know I went off on a couple of tangents. It made the whole install a whole lot harder than it had to be, but I hope you got the general idea and gave you some ideas of whether or not you need, or whether or not you would want to install these on your Bronco. If it helped out, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.